Hare Krishna, my friends. Welcome to Bhaktiville. Here we are, Friday night. It's Srimad Bhagavatam night. Yay! So I'm here with Bhaktiville, and I'm sure Kandita will join us shortly. We're reading this chapter. Krishna is the source of all incarnations, and it's been very enlivening for me. Krishna is making himself available to everyone, all spirit souls in all the universes, 24/7. This chapter is making that abundantly clear. It's so amazing. So let's just continue. Let's just jump right in. We're on text 30 of the First Canto, chapter 3. That's page 197 of the PDF or 170 of the book. But, of course, before we get started, we have a couple of things to do. So let's offer our obeisances to Srila Prabhupada first. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. And please accept my humble obeisances. Vanchakalpa Charubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I also offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees and can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. And then, Bhaktivinoda is right on top of it there. He's moved the screen so that we can see exactly what we're going to be doing next. Thank you, Bhaktivinoda. So yes, so we have those 4 verses that we sing before we start to read Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O my Lord, the all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Wait for the board to kind of clear up a little bit. It's still blurry to me. Is it blurry to you, Bhaktivinoda? Oh, there it goes. Okay, now it's clear. Okay. All right, let's read the next one. Shrinvatam svakata Krishna punya shravana kirtanaha hridyantasto hyabhadrani vidonoti suhritsatam. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, Supersoul, in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. And then the last one. Nashta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Irrevocable fact. All right, so we are on chapter 3, First Canto, chapter 3, text 30, page 197 of the PDF or 170 of the book. All right, so we'll do the, what do we do here? I think we just do it straightforward. We don't have any, in other readings that we have here in Bhaktiville, sometimes we read the translation first, and then we do the Sanskrit, and then in one of them we read the word for word first, and then the Sanskrit, and then the English. But here, I think on Friday nights, we just go the normal way. I know. We just change it. Every one of our readings is a little different because it's a little different because we're reading different texts, but we have kind of a different approach. I just talk about it for a second. So our Tuesday night, if you would like to come, our Tuesday night here in Bhaktiville is Bhagavad Gita, and we really discuss things pretty thoroughly there. And so we read the English first, and then we read the Sanskrit, then word for word, then the English again. And we're reading from two different versions of Bhagavad Gita, the original Bhagavad Gita of Srila Prabhupada's, and then the edited version. And so the translation is often different from the two different texts. And then, which is, sometimes a cause for a discussion of the meaning. Then the other text we read is Bhagavad Arkamrichimala, which is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's collection of what he considered the 1,000 most important verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. And he's ordered them in categories of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, the concept of the world, and Bhakti Yoga, and then how to achieve Bhakti Yoga, and then how to achieve Prema. And in that one, we read the English, the word for word first, and then we read the Sanskrit, and then the translation, and no purports in that reading. But I do give those purport links on our Facebook page. So you can always follow those and read those later. So anyway, I was a little confused there. But this one we do straightforward as Srila Prabhupada did when he was here on the planet. So call and response. Etad rupam bhagavato. Etad rupam bhagavato. Yarupasya chid atmanaha. Yarupasya chid atmanaha. Maya gunar virachitam. Maya gunar virachitam. Ma adadibir atmani. Ma adadibir atmani. All right, let's do it all together. Etad rupam bhagavato yarupasya chid atmanaha maya guna virachitam mahadadibir atmani. Is Kandita here? No, not here. Maybe we should text her. Maybe she forgot. All right, word for word. Etat, all these. Rupam, forms. Bhagavataha, of the Lord. He, certainly. Arupasya, of one who has no material form. Chit atmanaha, of the transcendence. Maya, material energy. Gunai, by the qualities. Virachitam, manufactured. Mahat adibihi, with the ingredients of matter. Atmani, in the self. Translation. The conception of the Virata of the Virata universal form of the Lord, as appearing in the material world, is imaginary. It is to enable the less intelligent and neophytes to adjust to the idea of the Lord having form, but factually, the Lord has no material form. So as I was reading that, I said Virat Rupa, because here he's referring to that universal form, the Virat Rupa, which was shown to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 11. So here, Prabhupada speaks some more about it in the purport. The conception of the Lord, known as the Vishvarupa or the Virata Rupa, is particularly not mentioned along with the various incarnations of the Lord, because all the incarnations of the Lord above mentioned are transcendental, and there is not a tinge of materialism in their bodies. There is no difference between the body and self as there is in the conditioned soul. He's talking about Krishna here. The Virata Rupa is conceived for those who are just neophyte worshippers. For them, the material Virata Rupa is presented, and it will be explained in the second canto. In the Virata Rupa, the material manifestations of different planets have been conceived as his legs, hands, etc. Actually, all such descriptions are for the neophytes. The neophytes cannot conceive anything beyond matter. The material conception of the Lord is not counted in the list of his factual forms. As Paramatma, or Supersoul, the Lord is within each and every material form, even within the atoms, but the outward material form is but an imagination, both for the Lord and the living being. The present forms of the conditioned souls are also not factual. The conclusion is that the material conception of the body of the Lord is Virata, is imaginary. Both the Lord and the living beings are living spirits and have original spiritual bodies, respectively. Bhaktiville says, imaginary? That is new to me. Well, so then I think Prabhupada explains that. Oh, you say it's really difficult? I think he's using imagination and imaginary in the same way. They are imagination. Oh, so Bhaktiville says it's really difficult to conceive a form that is not material. That seems more like imagination. Well, so here Srila Prabhupada is making the distinction, drawing out the explanation of the verse, that our real form is a spiritual form, and that the material form, it's that whole reflection in the water thing. We have a form, it's just not material. And the material form that we have is created by our own imagination. What we like to do, all those things that we like. Those are the subtle things that create the body. So it is imagination. It's not our real form. Does that make it clear? Consciousness comes before matter. Exactly. Consciousness comes before matter. And it's that consciousness and the desires of the consciousness that imagine, that create this form, these different forms that we live in, that we as spirit soul hop around from one to the other. But in a couple of purports on, he talks about accepting death. It's because we accept birth, we accept death. Bhaktiville says, I notice people saying consciousness, but it sounds more like mind. Yes, I agree with you. It does sound more like mind, because they don't have any idea what consciousness really is. It's deeper than mind. It's the person who's inhabiting that mind, that body, that physical form that's causing all of that to go on. Oh, now he's typing secret things. So he'll tell me later. He's telling me secret things. He wants to discuss this later. Okay, fine. All right, text 31. Call and response. Yata nabasi me go go. Well, that'd be me go go. Me go go. It's a funny word. What's that word? The massive clouds. Oh, mega dutit. Right, massive clouds. Okay. All right. The phrase. Yata nabasi me go go. Renur Partivo Nile Renurvar Partivo Nile Evam Drashtari Drishyatvam Evam Drashtari Drishyatvam Aropitam Abudibi Ropitam Abudibihi. All right, let's try that one. There's some tongue twisters in this one, but let's do it all together. Yata nabasi me galgo renur vai partivo nile evam drashtari drishyatvam aropitam abudibihi. Word for word. Yata, as it is, nabasi, in the sky, megal gaha, a mass of clouds, renuhu, dust, va, as well as, partivaha, muddiness, anile, in the air, evam, thus, drashtari, to the seer, drishyatvam, for the purpose of seeing, aropitam, is implied, abudibihi, by the less intelligent persons. Excuse me. Translation. I love this verse. Clouds and dust are carried by the air, but less intelligent persons say that the sky is cloudy and the air is dirty. Similarly, they also implant material bodily conceptions on the spirit self. Purport. It is further confirmed herein that with our material eyes and senses, we cannot see the Lord, who is all spirit. We cannot even detect the spiritual spark which exists within the material body of the living being. We look to the outward covering of the body or subtle mind of the living being, but we cannot see the spiritual spark within the body. So we have to accept the living being's presence by the presence of his gross body. Similarly, those who want to see the Lord with their present material eyes or with the material senses are advised to meditate on the gigantic external feature called the Virat Rupa. For instance, when a particular gentleman goes in his car, which can be seen very easily, we identify the car with the man within the car. When the president goes out in his particular car, we say, "There's the president." For the time being, we identify the car with the president. Similarly, less intelligent men who want to see God immediately, without necessary qualification, are shown first the gigantic material cosmos as the form of the Lord, although the Lord is within and without. The clouds in the sky and the blue of the sky are better appreciated in this connection. Although the bluish tint of the sky and the sky are different, still we conceive of the color of the sky as blue, but that is a general conception for the layman only. I really like this verse. I like the whole idea about the air is not dirty and the sky is not cloudy, as a way to distinguish, as a as a way to distinguish the spirit soul from the body. All right, text 32, a call and response. Ata paramyad avyaktam atta para, atta paramyad avyaktam avyudha guna brahmitam avyudha guna brahmitam adrishta shruta vastutvat adrishta shruta vastutat vastutvat sajivo yat punarbhavaha sajivo yat punarbhavaha. And the whole verse together. Ata param yad avyaktam avyuda guna brahmitam adrishruta vastutvat sajivo yat punarbhavaha. And the word for word. Ataha, this. Param, beyond. Yat, which. Avyaktam, unmanifested. Avyuda, without formal shape. Guna brahmitam, affected by the qualities. Adrishta, unseen. Ashruta, unheard. Vastutvat, being like that. Saha, that. Jivaha, living being. Yet, that which. Punarbhavaha, takes birth repeatedly. Translation. Beyond this gross conception of form, there is another subtle conception of form, which is without formal shape and is unseen, unheard, and unmanifest. The living being has his form beyond this subtlety. Otherwise, he could not have repeated births. Purport. As the gross cosmic manifestation is conceived as the gigantic body of the Lord, so also there is the conception of his settled form, which is simply realized without being seen, heard, or manifested. But in fact, all these gross or subtle conceptions of the body are in relation with the human beings. The living being has his spiritual form beyond this gross material or subtle psychic existence. The gross body and psychic functions cease to act as soon as the living being leaves the visible gross body. In fact, we say that the living being has gone away because he is unseen and unheard. Even when the gross body is not acting, when the living being is in sound sleep, we know that he is within the body by his breathing. So the living being's passing away from the body does not mean that there is no existence of the living soul. It is there. Otherwise, how can he repeat his births again and again? The conclusion is that the Lord is eternally existent in his transcendental form, which is neither gross nor subtle like that of the living being. His body is never to be compared to the gross and subtle bodies of the living being. All such conceptions of God's body are imaginary. The living being has his eternal spiritual form, which is conditioned only by his material contamination and his imagination, right? Text 33, call and response. Yatre me sad asad rupe, yatre me sad asad rupe, pratish siddhe svasamvida, pratish, no, I said that wrong. Pratishide, pratishide, pratishide svasamvida, avidya yatmani krite avidyayatmani krite iti tad brahma darshanam iti tad brahma darshanam. All right, all together. Yatra me sad asad rupe pratishide sva samvida avidyayatmani krite iti tad brahma darshanam. Word for word. Yatra, whenever, ime, in all these, sat asat, gross and subtle, rupe, in the forms of, pratishide, on being nullified, svasamvida, by self-realization, avidyaya, by ignorance, atmani, in the self, krite, having been imposed, iti, thus, tat, that is, Brahmadarshanam, the process of seeing the Absolute. Translation. Whenever a person experiences, by self-realization, that both the gross and subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, at that time he sees himself as well as the Lord. Purport. The difference between self-realization and material illusion is to know that the temporary or illusory impositions of material energy in the shape of gross and subtle bodies are superficial coverings of the self. The coverings take place due to ignorance. Such coverings are never effective in the person of the personality of Godhead. Knowing this convincingly is called liberation, or seeing the Absolute. This means that perfect self-realization is made possible by adoption of godly or spiritual life. Self-realization means to become indifferent to the needs of the gross and subtle bodies and to become serious about the activities of the self. The impetus for activities is generated from the self, but such activities become illusory due to ignorance of the real position of the self. By ignorance, self-interest is calculated in terms of the gross and subtle bodies, and therefore a whole set of activities is spoiled, life after life. When, however, one meets the self by proper culture, the activities of the self begin. Therefore, a man who is engaged in the activities of the self is called Jivan Mukta, or a liberated person, even in the conditional existence. This perfect stage of self-realization is not attained by artificial means, but under the lotus feet of the Lord, who is always transcendental. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he is present in everyone's heart, and from him only all knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness take place. When the living being desires to be an enjoyer of material energy, illusory phenomena, the Lord covers the living being in the mystery of forgetfulness, and thus the living being misinterprets the gross body and subtle mind to be his own self. And by culture of transcendental knowledge, when the living being prays to the Lord for deliverance from the clutches of forgetfulness, the Lord, by his causeless mercy, removes the living being's illusory curtain, and thus he realizes his own self. He then engages himself in the service of the Lord, in his eternal constitutional position, becoming liberated from the conditioned life. All this is executed by the Lord through either his external potency or directly by the internal potency. So the external potency he's referring to is the material world, and the internal potency is the spiritual world. Text 34. Call and response. Yadya esho parata Devi Yadyesho Parata Devi Maya Vaisharadi Matihi Maya Vaisharadi Matihi Sampana. Oh, did we do that? We did. Sampana Evati Vidur Sampana Evati Vidur Mahimni Se Mahiyate Mahimni Se Mahiyate. And then all together. Yadyaisho Parata Devi Maya Vaisharadi Mati Sampana Evati Vidur Mahimni Sve Mahiyate. Sorry. Word for word. Yadi, if, however, if or however. Esha, they. Uparata, subsided. Devi, Maya, illusory energy. Vaisharadi, full of knowledge. Matihi, enlightenment. Sampanaha, enriched with. Eva, certainly. Iti, thus. Viduhu, being cognizant of. Mahimni, in the glories. Sve, of the self. Mahiyate, being situated in. Translation. If the illusory energy subsides and the living entity becomes fully enriched with knowledge by the grace of the Lord, then he becomes at once enlightened with self-realization and thus becomes situated in his own glory. Purport. Being part of the absolute transcendence, all the Lord's forms, names, pastimes, attributes, associates, and energies are identical with him. His transcendental energy acts according to his omnipotency. The same energy acts as his external, internal, and marginal energy. So that's the material, the spiritual, and marginal. We're the marginal energies, the jivas. So, and by his omnipotency, he can perform anything and everything through the agency of any of the above energies. He can turn the external energy into internal by his will. Therefore, by his grace, the external energy, which is employed in illusioning those living beings who want to have it, subsides by the will of the Lord in terms of repentance and penance for the conditioned soul. And the very same energy then acts to help the purified living being make progress on the path of self-realization. The example of electrical energy is very appropriate in this connection. The expert electrician can utilize the electrical energy for both heating and cooling by adjustment only. Similarly, the external energy, which now bewilders the living being into continuation of birth and death, is turned into internal potency by the will of the Lord to lead the living being to eternal life. I love that sentence. I highlighted it here in my book. Like, that's a lovely sentence. I read it again. So similarly, the external energy, which now bewilders the living being into continuation of birth and death, is turned into internal potency by the will of the Lord to lead the living being to eternal life. When the living being is thus graced by the Lord, he is placed in his proper constitutional position to enjoy eternal spiritual life. That's just lovely. All right, text 35. Call and response. Evam janmani karmani. Evam janmani karmani. Sorry. I'm starting to get a cold, so my voice is not that great tonight. Hyakartur ajanasya cha. Hyakartur ajanasya cha. Varnayanti Smakavayo Varnayanti Smakavayo Vedaguyani Hritpatehe Vedaguyani Hritpatehe. And then all together. Evam Janmani Karmani Yakartur Arjanasya Cha Varnayanti Smakavayo Vedaguyani Hritpatehe. Evam, thus, Janmani, birth, Karmani, activities. He, certainly, Akartuhu, of the inactive, Ajanasya, of the unborn, Cha, and Varnayanti, describe, Sma, in the past, Kavayaha, the learned, Vedaguyani, undiscoverable by the Vedas, Hritpatehe, of the Lord of the heart. Translation. Thus, learned men describe the births and activities of the unborn and inactive, which is undiscoverable even in the Vedic literatures. He is the Lord of the heart. Purport. Both the Lord and the living entities are essentially all spiritual. Therefore, both of them are eternal, and neither of them has birth and death. Difference is that the so-called births and disappearances of the Lord are unlike those of the living beings. The living beings who take birth and then again accept death are bound by the laws of material nature. But the so-called appearance and disappearance of the Lord are not actions of material nature, but are demonstrations of the internal potency of the Lord. They are described by the great sages for the purpose of self-realization. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita by the Lord that his so-called birth in the material world and his activities are all transcendental, and simply by meditation on such activities one can attain realization of Brahman and thus become liberated from material bondage. In the Shrutis it is said that the birthless appears to take birth. The Supreme has nothing to do, but because he is omnipotent, everything is performed by him naturally, as if done automatically. As a matter of fact, the appearance and disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his different activities are all confidential, even to the Vedic literatures. Yet they are displayed by the Lord to bestow mercy upon the conditioned souls. We should always take advantage of the narrations of the activities of the Lord, which are meditations on Brahman in the most convenient and palatable form. All right, I think we have time for this one more. Text 36. Call and response. Sava idam vishvam amogalilaha. Savam idam vishvam amogalilaha. Srijatyavattyati nasajjatesmin. Srijatyavattyati nasajjatesmin. Bhuteshu chantarhita atmatantraha. Bhuteshu chantarhita atmatantraha. Shadvargikam jigrati shadguneshaha. Shadvargitam vigrati sadguneshaha. This is a little different than our regular verses, has more syllables. So we'll just kind of weigh it. Sava idam vishvam amogalilaha. Srijatyavattyati nasajjatesmin. Bhuteshu chantarhita atmatantraha. Shadvargikam jagrati sadgune Shadguneshaha, and the word for word. Saha, the Lord, Supreme Lord. Va, alternately. Idam, this. Vishvam, manifested universes. Amoka Lila, one whose activities are spotless. Shrijati, creates. Avati Akti, maintains and annihilates. Not. Sajate is affected by. Astin, in them. Puteshu, in all living beings. Cha, also. Antarhitam, living within. Atmatantraha, self-independent. Shat Vargitam, endowed with all the potencies of six opulences. Jigrati, superficially attached, like smelling the fragrance. Shat Ganeshaha, master of the six senses. Translation. The Lord, whose activities are always spotless, is the master of the six senses and is omnipotent and full with six opulences. He creates the manifested universes, maintains them, and annihilates them without being in the least affected. He is within every living being and is always independent. So when I read this, I went on a massive Google search for six senses because, there are just five. I was like, what's the sixth one? And it's not reading your mind. It's not the sixth sense, right? So I found two things, which I thought both were interesting and um, both could apply. So sight, hearing, smell, tasting, touching, five senses, and the mind. So Srila Prabhupada often um, says that those are the six. I saw that in quite a few places, but in some places he listed these six, which are, what does it say in the word for word? It's the six opulences. I'm trying to find the words. Oh, no. Okay, so six enemies of the mind, which Prabhupada says in one lecture in Melbourne. He talks about these kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, which translates to desire, anger, greed, attachment, pride, and jealousy. And he refers to those as the six senses in this one lecture. So I'm sure there's a connection between the sight, hearing, smell, tasting, touching, and this kama, krodha, lobha, but I didn't have time to really um, follow that through all the way through. But then, also in this verse, are the six opulences of Krishna, which are wealth, strength, knowledge, beauty, fame, and renunciation. And that we've read, you'll remember from reading Bhagavad Gita. So, purport. The prime difference between the Lord and the living entities is that the Lord is the creator and the living entities are the created. Here he is called a Mokalila, which indicates there is nothing lamentable in his creation, spotless. Those who create disturbance in his creation are themselves disturbed. He is transcendental to all material afflictions because he is full with all six opulences, namely wealth, power, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. And thus he is the master of the senses. He creates these manifested universes in order to reclaim the living beings who are within them, suffering threefold miseries, maintains them, and in due course annihilates them without being the least affected by such actions. So he's not talking about annihilating the jiva. He's talking about annihilating these miseries. He is connected with this material creation very superficially, as one smells odor without being connected with the odorous article. Non-godly elements, therefore, can never approach him, despite all endeavors. So Bhaktiville says, he means the material living entities are created because he just said we always existed. All right, let's read that over again. The prime difference between the Lord and the living entities is that the Lord is the creator and the living entities are the created. Right, right. So there's this thing called, gosh, I had that word in my head for years. And now, as we get older, we forget so many things. Yeah, I can't remember what the word is. But we have always existed, even though he created us. We have always existed, and we are eternal because there's no ending. And that word is, I don't know. I'll have to think about that. See if I can remember what that word is. So yes, we have always existed, even though he created us. Any other mind-bending kinds of questions? What is that word? I want to say ananda, but that's not it. That's bliss. It's like it starts with a letter A. Nope, I don't remember what it is. When I remember it, I'll let you know. I'll let everybody know. I'll post it there on the Facebook page because that's just irritating when the speaker can't remember something. And then actually, when someone's giving a lecture, you never find out what the answer is because you never see them again, right? But here we can post it on Facebook. I'm looking around the room for the book that word is in. I'll find it. I'll let you know. Okay, so Bhakti Mimila says, LOL, no. No, he has no more questions. Like that. All right, my friends, let's chant Hare Krishna before we leave. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare. Hi, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you so very much for letting me read tonight, and I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you again soon. Hare Krishna.